What's up guys, thanks for tuning in. So today's video we're going to be showing you how to install the rear center carbon fiber hatch trim piece that you can get for your C8 Corvette. This is a pretty in-depth how-to, so with that being said, let's get started on this.
So to start this how-to, here are some of the main tools that you're going to be needing to complete the job. The job can take anywhere from 3 to 6 hours including window cure time, and mainly depends on your skill level. And you can find a link to all the needed tools in the description below, as well as a link for the part we are installing that comes from Extreme Online Store, who is sponsoring this video. So first thing we're going to be doing is apply ceramic coating on the carbon fiber insert piece. This isn't mandatory but is highly recommended, as this will help prevent yellowing of the piece from both the heat and the elements. And I'm using Adam's graphene ceramic coating on this, and it's what I go to for all of my pieces. I'm not sponsored by them, it's just my coating of choice. In any case, you'll want to prep the surface, apply the coats, and then buff off to complete. I like to do 2 to 3 coats to ensure I get full coverage, which will help keep the part looking great for a long time. So to start this install, the first thing we're going to need to do is remove the outer rear hatch trim pieces that surround the window and center piece that we're trying to replace. This will include the 2 side pieces as well as the deck lid camera. Opening the trunk, there will be 9 T25 Torx screws that will need to be removed, as well as 7 8mm nuts that will need to be removed for the center rear piece. While removing these screws, it's really a good practice to place a large towel or similar over the engine bay. This prevents any screws from falling into the abyss of the engine bay, never to be heard from again. At this point, remove all the screws and set them aside to reinstall later. Once all the screws are removed, you can then go ahead and remove the side trim piece. Remove the 8mm nuts and set aside for later. After this, you'll want to unplug the defroster connectors on the rear hatch window. There's one located on each side. Next thing we can do is remove the deck lid camera. You'll want to use a trim tool to pry the piece up, as it's held in place by some plastic rivets. Work on one side and then the other, and the piece should pop off. Once you have access to underneath the deck lid, you'll need to disconnect the camera. Pull the red tab and unplug the connector. You'll also need to slide the blue connector off the hinge it sits off of to finish disconnecting. Next, you'll want to apply painter's tape to mark the window for alignment and removal. This is honestly a backup since the window itself does have locator studs to help for reinstall, but it's good practice to do. You'll also want to apply painter's tape on the edge. I realized I hadn't mentioned it before if it's not obvious, but in order to remove that center piece from the C8, we need to temporarily remove the rear hatch window. This is because there's just not enough clearance to remove the piece otherwise. So we need to go prep the area for removing the window and prevent scratching of the paint around while we work. In any case, the next thing we will need to do is remove the window seal. You should be able to pull from an edge and should just come off pretty easily. At this point, we can go ahead and apply suction cups to the window. These are going to stay on basically until the window has been reinstalled and has cured back on the car. By the way, I do want to point out that I did definitely try and see at this point if it's possible to do this job without removing the window, but as you can see, it's not possible without running the risk of damaging either the window or the surrounding area to make it work. There's just not enough clearance to make it work otherwise. So in any case, to show how to remove the window, we need to take a look at what's underneath. Underneath the window, we have 4 plastic locating studs that are attached to the window with adhesive. They help locate the window in the right spot as well as help keep it in place. The yellow highlighted areas are the polyurethane window sealant locations. This is what we're going to need to remove in order to take off the window. So to start on the main window removal, there's the main tool we'll be using to cut through the polyurethane holding the window in place. Now the adhesive is pretty hard to cut through, honestly. To make the job way easier, use a heat gun to soften the window weld. Just make sure to keep the heat gun moving and not hitting any single spot for too long. Once you have heated the area, use the tool by inserting the blade along the edge of the window and pulling slowly and smoothly. If the heat gun has done the trick, it should be relatively easy to move the tool through with about a medium amount of force. The point is that when the pulling becomes rather difficult, use the heat gun and work in sections to make it easier. Now with the window locating studs attached to the window, you basically have 2 options on removing them. I will say they are pretty hard to pop off being plastic and could be deformed, so in my case I focused on removing them from the window and then unplugging them. Using the secondary window removal tool works in this case, which uses 2 handles and a wire to saw through the adhesive. Using the generic handles from the toolkit I purchased is fine, but I did buy some braided wire that works a little bit better than the generic wire that comes with those kits. In any case, to use the second tool, you'll need to first guide the wire through the adhesive using the plunger tool that's provided. Once it's through, you'll attach the wire to the handle that goes through the hollowed hole and locks into place. after which you'll use the handles and wire to saw through the polyurethane and adhesives on the studs. The thin wire allows you to get through the studs with relative ease, but just make sure you're going through the adhesive and not the plastic studs themselves. If you're finding it hard to get through, you're going through the plastic and not the adhesive. Reset and try again until you can get all the way through. Depending, you may need to use this method to get through the forward edge corners, as the other tool may not have the reach with the blade to get all the way through. If you decide to go with the option of leaving the studs on the window, you'll need to use a trim tool to pop off the locator studs. I was able to do this for one of the studs just to see if it was possible, but it did require some effort and could damage the studs and the window in the process potentially. Finally, with all the adhesive removed, you can now remove the rear window and place it to the side. From here on, it's downhill and the rest of the job will be considerably easier to get done, so give yourself a pat on the back for getting to this point and get something to drink if you haven't already, and we can then start on working on the rest of this how-to. Now, admittedly, I got too excited myself about removing the rear window that I completely forgot to show how to remove the actual OEM centerpiece, but it's pretty straightforward and easy. What I can show is the carbon fiber version on how it will be removed and installed, which is set up the exact same way. Removing the OEM piece should be easy, and all you need to use is a trim tool to pry off the part from the two sections of the piece that are held on with double-sided tape. It's the same locations as that on the carbon fiber piece as shown. Once the OEM piece is removed, use a cleaner to clean the surface where the new carbon fiber piece will be sitting, and remove the double-sided tape backing on the carbon fiber piece to install into place. Now that the piece we have is installed, we can now look at getting the rear window reinstalled back on. This means we will need to prep the hatch window surface again, as well as the window itself. We'll start with the hatch, which begins with using some soapy water and a microfiber towel to clean the surface area. I have some leftover soapy water that's in this little applicator which I use, but any kind of light soap with water mix will work just fine. The point is just to make sure that the whole area is cleaned. Next, we need to prep the old polyurethane or window weld that's still on the hatch. So in general, polyurethane sticks best to itself, so we don't want to completely remove all that's on the actual rear hatch. Instead, we want to leave a very thin base layer that's all still very well attached to the hatch, but will work as a way to lay down the new layer once we get ready to reapply the window. So to do this, we want to take a razor and make a clean line that leaves about 1 millimeter of window weld still left. We also want to make sure to use some IPA to clean the razor before use. Most razors have a very thin layer of oil on them to prevent them from rusting that you want to remove before you start using. Now it's a slow process, but using a heat gun to soften the polyurethane will make it a lot easier and faster to get through this part. You're going to want to let the razor lay flat and cut along the line and work slow and steady. Removing sections at a time will get it all taken off. You don't have to be perfect on the first try to get it all off. You can get a good chunk of it off initially and then come back to get a really thin layer. I found that this worked much faster and easier than trying to do it perfect from the first try. After which the hatch surface will be ready to go, and then we can work on the window side of things. So to prep the window for reinstall, we'll need to clean off all the adhesive and polyurethane that's on the window surface, apply new 3M primer, and then reapply the locating studs and window seal. In contrast to what we did on the hatch, we want to make sure that we completely remove all the adhesive and polyurethane from the glass. Using a razor with a handle will give you the extra leverage to do that relatively easy. We're also going to want to mark all the stud locations if you remove them in the previous step so that we can replace them exactly later. Again, use the heat gun to soften the adhesive on the window. You're going to want to use the razor on a handle to apply a bit of force and work at a 45-degree angle. You don't need to worry about scratching the window, and any black primer that you remove along with the adhesive will be okay because we're going to be going over with new black primer afterwards. This will also take a little bit of time, but you want to make sure to go slow and remove everything from the surface. After which you can then use IPA or similar to completely clean the surface of any contaminants, and the surface will be ready to go for the new primer. Next, you'll need to apply the 3M primer around the edge using a cotton swab to apply. Make sure to shake the bottle for about a good minute or so. There are little metal BBs inside the bottle that should rattle freely when it's completely mixed in. The big thing when applying the primer is to do a continuous even coat as much as possible. I ended up splitting it into 3 sections, the 2 sides and forward section. If you scrape some of the old primer off the window edges, make sure to cover those up as well. Once applied, you'll need to let the primer dry, which takes about 15 minutes. You'll also want to make sure that you apply primer to the stud locations, in particular the front locations as well. Once dry, you can then apply the locator studs back onto the window. At this point, the studs are back on and you want to do a dry fit test to make sure all the studs are located correctly for the window to go into place. Place the window into place and check alignment, but don't press down to lock the studs into place. Once you're happy with the alignment, we can go ahead and remove the window to now apply the window seal around the edge of the window. Now, if your original window seal looks to be in good shape, you can definitely clean this up and apply new tape adhesive and go from there. Honestly, for me, that was a lot of work, and I found it just much easier to just use new automotive window seal to get the job done. You'll want to apply the window seal along the edge and do only the front and side edges, as the rear edge is free. I found it a lot easier to apply in sections and overlap, especially with the front corners being so sharp and the window seal is not wanting to bend around so easily. It works well enough since the window is just for the engine bay and doesn't impact the interior cabin seal. With that being done, the window and hatch are now prepped and ready to install, and we just need to prep the window weld we're going to be using. Now, this part is extremely important, as improper window welding will cause the window to come off, which can be dangerous, especially if you're driving on the highway. Generally, for proper window welding, you want to create a triangular slot in the nozzle so that the flow of the weld comes out in a triangular section that sticks straight up. This sticks significantly better than just applying a regular bead that goes along the pathway with more surface area to contact. To accomplish this, we need to cut the bottom of the nozzle to be a hole of about 1/4 of an inch size, and then we're going to need to cut a triangular section out of the nozzle. Generally, for the shape of the triangle, you'll want it to be about 1/2 inch high and cut about half the length of the bottom. In the end, it should look similar to how I've cut mine, and when you apply, it should be applied vertically and not at an angle. At this point, we can set up the window weld and do test runs on a piece of cardboard to make sure we get an even flow and can have a better idea of how it comes out. Keep in mind that this particular 3M window weld has a fast cure rate and will only give you about 15 minutes work time to apply that line and attach the window. So you'll want to make sure that you have everything ready to go for both the window and hatch before doing this part. The 15 minutes is enough time to do these practice welds and apply to the hatch, but just keep in mind of the clock. When you're ready, apply the weld on the prepped locations. Again, focus on applying a continuous flow of weld with no gaps and try your best to have the flow stay straight up. If it seems to be flopping from one side or the other, you may need to increase your flow as you're applying to help keep it up and slow down how fast you're passing through. Going slow and steady is the key. When you get to the point you need to go to the other side, start from where you left and continue the line. If there's a gap, use some plastic razors to help stick them together. This is actually called paddling, which is common when doing this kind of work by hand. Once the window weld is back on, reinstall the back window and make sure to carefully align the studs to place. It goes without saying, having a second set of hands specifically for this part of the job is very handy, as you only really get one shot to do this right. Once aligned, you'll want to push down firmly on both sides to lock the studs and window into place. Give it a good slap to all the weld locations to ensure the weld is captured in all the different spots. At this point, you're going to want to place some tape on the top of the window. This will help prevent sagging as the window dries. Generally, it's not needed in our case because the window studs are holding it in place, but it's honestly a good practice to do anyways. Once done, you'll need to let the window cure for at minimum 1 hour. The polyurethane will still be soft and full cure takes a whole 24 hours to complete, but the 1 hour is the absolute minimum wait time if you want to start getting everything else back on in the meantime. When it's cured, we can then remove all the masking tape and suction cups. After which we can reinstall the deck lid camera in the opposite order. Biggest thing is to make sure that the wiring goes along the insides between all the plastic studs so the wires don't get pinched. You'll want to replug and push the red tab in to secure as well. When it's installed, you can simply push down on the deck lid to secure it into place. After which, the last thing to do is reinstall the side trim and all the T25 Torx screws and 8mm nuts. Make sure you don't over tighten these screws, as you can run the risk of damaging the carbon fiber pieces themselves that these screws and nuts are bonded to. If you have any questions about this install, please leave it in the comments below.
So as you can see, it's a pretty doable install if you know exactly what you're doing. Kind of like how I didn't when I first did it, but now you know, and so it's definitely doable, and I would definitely encourage you to do it if you are half decent with a wrench and can be able to do this kind of stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please check out any of my other videos, and we'll see you next time.